Defense. Defense. Welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve. Didn't bother setting up the lights or anything because I'm not going to be in most of this video because the visuals are going to take up most of the video. So today we will be looking at a few different things before we look at my DST rankings, my top 15 DST rankings. If you need to know further, or if you're curious about where a certain team ranks, you can find the rankings up on the website at www.theffforge.com. There's a link down in the description below where you can find the website if you didn't catch what the website is. So, I want to get to the video. First of all, though, I have a really good video that a lot of people seem to like. However, it just doesn't seem to be catching on. So if you didn't catch it, my targets video recently, it's a little bit lengthier, came out. So one target for every round, I think I did, right? Later on this week, I will be doing the guys that I will be avoiding, my busts list. So check that out come Thursday evening, afternoon. And let's just get started here with the 5 best DST schedules from weeks 1 through 3. Before getting to the list, let me just quick explain. This is based on 5 factors. This is a formula in some form that I have used for years and years, which has been pretty good on identifying good DSTs. It evolves every single season. Those 5 factors are sacks allowed, interceptions thrown, passing touchdowns, rushing touchdowns, and fumbles, not fumbles recovered, because that's a super sticky, not sticky stat, and fumbles is at least a little bit more sticky than the actual fumbles recovered. Is this the model, the end-all, be-all? Should you use this to say, oh, that's a good defense or a bad defense? No, and that's why I have rankings, but this is looking at the best schedules, and right now we're going to look at from weeks 1 through 3. For all of you streamers out there, it's a good strategy to stream defenses. I do prefer to try for a top-of-the-line defense, and like I said, my model's been pretty good over the years of finding some of the good ones. For instance, last year, Philadelphia Eagles were really, really good on my model, and I just couldn't get on board with that. They weren't a popular pick preseason, and unfortunately, I didn't just trust the model. And you may notice a bit of a difference in the audio quality. Had an issue while recording, and it stopped recording a short ways in. So, re-recording now, and I almost forgot to mention, as far as those 5 categories go, a team had to be significantly above or below average in order for any points to be rewarded. Main idea behind that being that if a team was the best or worst in a single category, statistically speaking, they probably won't be going all the way to the bottom or the top, the opposite end of the spectrum in that category. Maybe, best case scenario, they end up being middle of the road, and then at least it's still a decent matchup. Let's get started with the 2023 5 best DST schedules from weeks 1 through 3, starting off with the Baltimore Ravens, who are going to be facing the Houston Texans, Cincinnati Bengals, and the Indianapolis Colts, and at least 2 of those 3 matchups sure seem to be pretty darn solid. The second best DST from weeks 1 through 3 is going to be the Houston Texans. They will be facing Baltimore, Indianapolis, and Jacksonville. I don't think that this is not one that I am going to be banking on actually happening. Baltimore should definitely be better than they were for a lot of last season. And you will also notice in these first 3 teams, they will all be facing Indianapolis. I'm going to guess that is not by coincidence. Actually, 2 of them are facing Indianapolis and Houston. And that's going to bring us to the next team, Jacksonville, going up against Indianapolis, Kansas City, and then Houston. So once again, 2 of the 3 teams sure look appetizing. And at least Kansas City, Jacksonville, Cincinnati, they pass a lot. You can always hope for an interception. And I think that's going to be more true of the third team that the Washington Commanders will be facing. They will be going up against Arizona, Denver, and then the Buffalo Bills in that order. And so not a terrible schedule, although I do think that Denver will probably be a better offense than they were last season, one might think. But catching them early in the season might be helpful to making this Commanders defense be more fruitful throughout those first 3 weeks. But here's the team that I'm really banking on out of these 5 teams early on in the season is going to be the New Orleans Saints with the 5th best schedule, going up against the Tennessee Titans, Carolina Panthers and the Green Bay Packers. That seems like a pretty solid bet. Maybe not the highest end upside to going against those matchups. I think all three of those teams will be having a focus on the running game. So fewer opportunities to get the big play, the pick six that you really want from a DST. But all in all, I think you'll look at those 3 weeks and they should be pretty solid throughout those 3 games. Let's move on to the best season-long schedules. And in first place is going to be the Atlanta Falcons. And I did go and check out Fantasy Pros website's schedules as far as strength of schedule for the DSTs. And all of my strength of schedules, they were in line. They were not the same, but the names, there was nothing out of the, having Atlanta as the DST number 1 for strength of schedule here, whereas on Fantasy Pros, they were the worst strength of schedule. Far from that. So there definitely was some backing up to the model for me this season. Then in second place here is going to be the Cleveland Browns. And I have to say, I think having Baltimore in that division last year probably ended up helping them as far as the strength of schedule goes looking into this season, but probably won't be as good of a situation this year. So I would take this with a little bit of a grain of salt for Cleveland, but I'm sure there's still some truth to it overall. Then we have the Tennessee Titans coming up next. Also, touchdowns. I'm sure that Pittsburgh was probably low on the touchdown scored list. We were expecting that to change as well for a team like Cleveland going up against those teams 4 games a year. But now we're going to have 2 teams in the same division. I'm sure that has a lot to do with it, going up against Houston and Indianapolis 4 times a year each. The Tennessee Titans and the Jacksonville Jaguars have good schedules, and I'm not going to argue with that. Probably still going to be pretty solid schedules that you can bank on being excited about a fair amount of times throughout the year. And then the New Orleans Saints, once again, going to be in place number 5 here with having one of the best schedules season long. And that combined with other factors, and also combined with the fact that they have one of the best schedules throughout the first 3 weeks, is a reason that the New Orleans Saints are definitely going to be a target of mine for where I can get them in a draft. Don't think they'll be disappointing at the very least. Then we have the 5 worst season-long schedules, and in first place we're going to see the Dallas Cowboys. In second place, the Seattle Seahawks. In third place, we have the Buffalo Bills. In fourth place, we have the New York Jets, and this is not the first time you've probably heard about the schedule, especially early season for the New York Jets. It's not pretty. It could create some issues for defense that we definitely think is good, but it might be tough for them to be great in fantasy. And then the San Francisco 49ers, so come in 5th. So you will see 1st, 3rd, 4th, 5th ranked there. All defenses that are going pretty high in fantasy drafts that we have pretty high hopes for. Defenses that are good defenses, but with really tough schedules. So maybe set your expectations back just a touch. But that's going to bring us into the main thing here, the top 15 DST, my rankings, based on several factors, and I did end up adding one factor in late, too late to remake this slide because I did not save the template for myself, so there are a couple of change-ups, and right off of the bat, you can see I had New England in as my number 1 DST, however, I have changed that over back to being San Francisco in as the number 1 DST, even with that really, really tough schedule. But those tough schedules for several of these top-ranked defenses are part of the reasons why I'm not trying to go out to attack them this season necessarily. San Francisco has one of the best defenses, if not the best defense in the league. Tough schedule yet again. Still my number 1 DST, followed up by New England, who originally I had higher than these next 3 teams, in part because all 3 of the DSTs 1, 3, and 4 now have the very rough schedules as we've covered. And New England year in and year out is consistently a top DST. Trust the coaching for the defense. They've added some more pieces into a defense that they regularly replenish and refill, and it works out most seasons. That it's a top end defense. I will feel safe if I'm taking one of the top defenses and I get the New England Patriots. We have the Philadelphia Eagles ranked 3rd. If they are not the best defense, just like San Francisco, they are definitely one of the top 3 DSTs. And I would argue San Francisco, Philadelphia, probably both the top 2 defenses in the league. Not too far behind them is a team like the Dallas Cowboys, but they have the single toughest projected schedule for DSTs, so that did not help them in the rankings here either. Still a very good defense, but be aware. Then we're going to have another situation where I did a little flipperoo at the last minute here. Moved the Baltimore Ravens back up, actually, to 5th place here because my formula, my model actually had them as a DST number 4, but I had moved them back because I am minorly concerned about them, at least early on in the season, with a loss like Marlon Humphrey, especially to what is an already thin unit in the secondary of the Baltimore Ravens, gives me concern. And so I had moved them back because then on the opposite end of that spectrum, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are going to be much more healthy than last season, and they have a pretty darn good schedule ahead of them, not too bad. So there's a lot of hope in what you might be able to get from the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, but with my last update, they did move back to 6th place. Now, let's move on to 7th and 8th. I believe we're going to have another flip here. So the New Orleans Saints are going to be in 8th. Let's talk about the Buffalo Bills, who are my 7th ranked DST. These rankings will almost certainly not be changing again prior to the draft. So the Buffalo Bills, it's a good defense, but it's a rough schedule. That's all. It's really that simple. And right behind them, we have the New Orleans Saints. And this is my target, as I've stated. They have the 5th best schedule, and they also have the 5th best opening schedule for the first 3 weeks. So I think they have a good shot at being a top 6 DST, and especially with that start to the season, I'll feel comfortable taking them, see what I got through those first 3 weeks, hopefully with nothing disastrous happening or no other DST maybe catching my eye in that period of time. I think they're a safe bet, especially for where you can get them in a draft, which is part of why they're my target. Then in the 9th slot here, we have the New York Jets. It's a good defense, like them a lot, but it is a rough schedule, and even more so, it's a really rough opening schedule for them. So I would have concerns about drafting them because I don't want to hold 2 DSTs, and I don't think I'll feel comfortable putting out there in week 1. Then we have the Kansas City Chiefs coming in at the 10th ranked defense, and I expect them to be a top 12 DST yet again. I feel confident about that. It's in a similar vein as to the New Orleans Saints, where it's just I feel safe with getting these defenses, even though maybe the upside isn't quite as much as some of the other defenses. Maybe they're not as good of a defense as some of these other defenses, between factors like schedules and just the history of these defenses. I feel pretty comfortable with them. And let's move on to the 11th ranked DST of mine, which is the Cincinnati Bengals. And it's a solid schedule for them. It's in favor of them having a good season. I like the defense a lot for Cincinnati, but it could be a slow start, which doesn't help their ranking here. They lost a few big pieces in that secondary in the offseason, and I expect there to be a couple of growing pains for players that I also have very high expectations for, liked in the NFL draft that they have taken over the last couple of seasons, knowing that this was coming for their defense. So they planned for it, and I still like the defense quite a bit. Just maybe some early on growing pains is all. And ranked number 12, I have the Cleveland Browns. They have a great schedule, and they've put a lot of effort into improving a defense that popped a few games last year, but otherwise underperformed in the rest of the games. That is in real life football and in fantasy football. They were a little bit disappointing overall, but they took a team that already looked pretty darn good on paper, but once again underperformed, and they continue to overhaul it. And I think in a lot of good ways overall, that this is a defense that could pop this season absolutely and end up being one of the top DSTs if they put everything together. So not a bad sleeper defense to grab. I don't know if you want to call them a sleeper defense, but just not a bad later defense here to take. And that is going to bring us into the final 3 slots, which are all out of order here. The Jacksonville Jaguars, the Denver Broncos, and the Miami Dolphins. And the Jacksonville Jaguars are actually going to take a tumble here with my most recent update, moving them back to the 15th ranked DST. So at 13, we're going to have the Denver Broncos. And they were one of, if not the best defense last year. They were a really, really good defense that got worn down as the season went along because of the offense absolutely stinking. And that can happen. That's actually happened, I think, a few times for the Miami Dolphins over the last couple of years, where a good defense looked worse because of a very poor offense, or an offense that maybe put them into some really bad situations several times. And they did their best with it, but at the end of the day, fantasy-wise, it didn't look too good. And so if the offense can hold their end of the bargain, Denver Broncos, another defense that could definitely pop and surpass some of these teams. Maybe some of these defenses that we really like a lot with really rough schedules could have better seasons than them. That kind of deal. I like them. I like several of these late defenses. And that's going to bring us to my 14th ranked defense, the Miami Dolphins. They were my dark horse 2 years ago, and they've disappointed really for the last 2 years in a row. And it hasn't been all their fault, as I was just talking about with how an offense can really tank the defense as well. But it's only a so-so schedule this season. It's not a great schedule. It's not a terrible schedule. And they've already lost their big acquisition in Jalen Ramsey for quite some time. So I'm a little bit concerned about them being anything special, but it is a good defensive unit, even without Jalen Ramsey. So, if you missed out on a bunch of defenses, take them with some faith. Or if you're taking 2 DSTs, not a bad option. And that's going to bring us to an option that I think I would actually, I don't know, I have them ranked behind the Dolphins for a reason here, I suppose. So I would probably follow my rankings, but it's close. My gut wants to say take Jacksonville. They have a great schedule this season. Last year, they were ranked DST number 7, according to my EV rankings, which pretty much, especially for a defense, just means that they were a consistent defense. Week in and week out, maybe they didn't provide you with a lot of pop. Maybe they did, but they were solid last year. I expect them to be better in 2023. Just much like the Carolina Panthers, I think both of those defenses early on in the season looked really good, and then they petered off. But at the end of the day, Jacksonville still was one of the better defenses in fantasy football, and it's a very good schedule this season. Expect them to improve from last season, but they are going to be my 15th ranked DST, not too far ahead from Green Bay Packers. I think that's about a tier break, would be the top 16 defenses. There's probably about 3 tiers in there, and the Green Bay Packers just barely missed off on this list. However, I do have a dark horse DST in the Detroit Lions that I would be I'll be keeping my eye on, and if I'm disappointed with whatever defense I get and they pop off even as early as week 1, there is a chance that I'll be going for them. They've had a lot of draft picks that I've really, really liked on their defense. They've brought in some free agents that should help that defense flesh out, and they have good coaching. So there's a lot of things to like about Detroit, but they were so poor last year for a lot of the season that it is tough to move them too far up, even though I really want to in my gut. I want to move them definitely ahead of Jacksonville even. It's so close. Just can't quite do it. The model wasn't feeling it either, and so not something I did, but thank you very much for watching this video, watching all of my videos, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. If you made it this far, please like, comment, and subscribe. Peace out. Take care. I love you all.